STEM education needs to be dethroned. I mean, no offense, but we have much bigger problems we need to tackle. Hello, welcome. My name is Emmy, and I'm a teacher and founder of Loretto Learning, where we provide project and discussion-based classes to homeschoolers. So today I want to talk about a problem. We have a big problem in our hands, and let me start by telling you the story. So on October 4th, 1957, the Soviet Union successfully launched Sputnik 1, which was the first man-made satellite to orbit the Earth. And just a month later, they launched Sputnik 2, and this time it had a dog in it. Meanwhile, Americans on the other side of the country watched in horror as our first attempt to launch a space satellite failed miserably on public television, and the reaction was strong. Fearing that we were even more backcountry than the Soviets, we decided to just stop everything and put a lot of our focus and resources on science, technology, engineering, and math. We reconfigured all of our infrastructure, especially the military system and our education system, to focus and cultivate more of the science, technology, engineering, and math, otherwise known as STEM. And today, we are by no means behind. I mean, I don't think anyone can doubt that the United States is a world leader when it comes to technology and technological advances. So the question then is, should we still keep STEM as king when it comes to our education? I'm not saying that we should stop focusing on STEM. I mean, after all, about 30% of the jobs out there are STEM jobs. But I just want us to take a step back and look at where our country is at. Look at where the world is going. There is still indeed a competition going on, just like the space race that started in the late 1950s. Okay, but this time it's not just between two countries. As a matter of fact, it's a war on all sides, and that's something that we need to address. Today, there is a war for our minds. There is a war for our attention. Now, I think some of it is being waged intentionally with malicious intent. And I think some of it also is just the organic, natural result of market competition and just the way things work with money and the economy. And the progress of technology has really created this. I mean, information is so fast and easy to access now. I mean, I remember when I had to wait to get the newspaper or for the 5 o'clock news to figure out what was happening in the world, or look things up and read articles, not just headlines, on the Grolier's Encyclopedia, right? Or go to the library. But things are a lot different now. Information is fast, free, and easy, and we are being inundated by so much of it, both good information and bad information. And it's really an unprecedented time in our history. And this is worrisome because information is king, right? Information, whoever controls information, controls decisions and actions. For example, look at the American Revolution. The idea of independence was not popular among the public in the 13 colonies until Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense, right? And then look at the Spanish-American War. There might not have been much public support for it if it hadn't been for the yellow journalism of people like William Randolph Hearst and William Pulitzer. And don't even get me started on the Nazis and how they controlled information and propaganda to control more of people's minds and their actions. So I think now what we have is this big battle, and people are trying to control information. And now look at today. I mean, I majored in history, and we say we only look back because the present is still too hard to analyze. Hindsight's 2020, blah, blah, blah. But I think when you just step back for a minute and even think about your life, like 10 or 20 years before today, things are a lot different, and it's not hard to see what's happening. What we have today is like a modern echo chamber, like I said, of both good and bad information. And it can be really hard to discern between the two, right? Repetition is powerful. Emotion is powerful. And sometimes those two things can trump logic any day of the week. And there are people and organizations who are fighting to influence us, and they're scrambling to get ever bigger megaphones to put their messages on repeat. Sure, we can try to cut all of that from our lives, use tech and social media minimally, try to stay above the fray, let the robots and the zombies have at it, right? But then that would make us a minority in society. And what happens to the minority, right? What happens to the minority when the majority moves? Or when the majority is moved by an even louder, yet maybe misguided minority? The minority that's decided to play the game and is really good at it. The minority that's good at communicating and influencing people because they know how to use repetition and emotion. The ones that influence and drive policy and decision making on the government level. You know, your modern versions of Thomas Paine, William Randolph Hearst, Joseph Pulitzer, right? Those guys moved whole populations into warfare. How do we tackle this? We can't stay away from it. We have to play the game, and we have to get good at it. We can't stay on the sidelines. We can't just play defense. We can't just sit still and let the world burn, right? As we try to stay free and away from it in our little utopian communities that we create on the outskirts of civilization. I just don't think that's realistic or that it's going to work because, you know, in the modern age, our lives, the lives of the minority, right, as independent as we'd like to think that we are and as free as we'd like to think that we are, our lives are intricately and unavoidably tied together. Can't really stay away from it, especially when the majority moves and makes decisions. It often affects the rest of us. The world that they create is the world that is being created for our children, right? We can't fool ourselves into thinking that we can just stay out of it because our children will have to live with that, right? And we don't know if they'll be able to stay out of it or stay away from it. So we have to prepare them, and we have to prepare the world. We have to take an active role in shaping the world into something that we can feel safe leaving them in, right? We have to be salt and light. We have to spread the truth. We have to spread good and beautiful ideas. And we have to teach our children how to do that and how to not be manipulated and fooled by bad information. And I think that's what needs to be king right now rather than STEM, right? And if you just keep working on STEM, I mean, what are you really telling them? That their worth or their happiness lies in their job? I mean, it's good to have, right? It's good to have a job, financial freedom, financial stability, okay? But that's only good if you're making the decisions for your own life and if you're really in control. And I think with this battle of information going on, how many people are truly free anyway? How many people are really making decisions for themselves instead of having been influenced by somebody else? And we want to make sure that our children is not in that position when they grow up as adults. We and our children need to become more fluent in how the government works, right? We need to really take a step back, be intentional, and learn and try to analyze propaganda, to analyze information and figure out if it's credible, if it's logical, if it's true. And in addition, we need to learn to communicate, right? To communicate respectfully and to try to take emotions out of it or learn to use emotions persuasively and positively and teach in the way that we interact with others. And we have to teach this to our children. We don't have to go big or extravagant, but there are a few things, I have a few pointers that we can start with to help with that, okay? So, number one, just ask questions, right? And get them to ask questions. Get in the habit of asking questions and challenging the information. A question that I love, right? It doesn't cover everything, but I think it's a great way to get kids to start thinking about how information is created and written and just expressed. And the question is, how do they know? Right? Or how do you know? You just need to always challenge whoever is making a claim or whatever article is making a claim. If you guys are reading something, I think it's important to just ask, well, how do they know, right? Especially when they're things that are conclusions, assessments that people are making. You need to question their evidence and if it makes logical connection to what they're trying to get you to believe, to really expose them to multiple perspectives or even just how viewpoints change, right? Maybe if they're in history, have them read both Howard Zinn and Thomas Sowell, okay? Like from opposing ends of the spectrum, or even just something as simple as maybe every few days or every week, you go through the home pages of major news sites like maybe MSNBC versus the Daily Wire, Fox News versus CNN, Associated Press, Reuters, right? Or even ones from different countries or different faiths, right? Like Deseret News, Catholic News Agency, Jerusalem Post versus Al Jazeera. So that way, just with how their home pages are built, you can start seeing, or your kids can start seeing, wow, they actually choose to emphasize different things, or they cover the same topic using different words that actually have very intentional triggers. So I think that becomes very apparent when you introduce multiple perspectives and compare the different sites, the different agencies. Another method I also love is just by having the kids read, like when you're teaching them in school or for homeschooling, to just look at history books from the past, right? It's so fascinating how historians, like the way they cover events of the past have changed, and how narratives have changed of the same story, right? Like if you look at a history book or a history narrative from the 20s, it'll be totally different from the ones from the 60s, which will be totally different from the ones from the 90s. Okay, so that's also a really great way to introduce this idea and get them used to the idea that perspectives, points of views are always changing, and there are different ways to communicate different ideas in order to get your readers, your listeners, your viewers, or whatever it is to listen to you and to be persuaded by you and your ideas. Number 3, please teach them about government. Teach them how government works. Right? Even just something as simple as federalism and checks and balances. And don't make it where it's just like, oh, this is the government, memorize it, memorize the definition of federalism, memorize the definition of judicial review. Actually, like, go into the news and show them or have them analyze how it's being played out today, right? Like, why is it so important that certain parties have the majority in Congress, right? Or in the House and in Senate? How is Congress interacting with the president? Or what kinds of decisions is the Supreme Court making, right? What laws from Congress are they striking down? So I think that's all really important. And please pay more attention to what's happening at the state level and the local level, because that's actually what directly impacts our lives, right? They have more power to, well, first we have more power as people to influence what's going on the local levels, right? Like our city governments, our county governments, our state governments. And it's just closer to us. They're the ones that set like police budget or school agendas. Okay, so we just need to, again, to just get more familiar with that and teach our children how to be more familiar with that. 4, have them write formal persuasive essays. It doesn't have to be written, right? It could be audio or video, and have them actually conduct formal research, even if it's small. Get them into the process of thinking about whether information or source is credible, right, and biased. Again, that goes with the whole multiple perspective things. But when you get them through, when you have them do research, there's a part where they're actually really needing to vet their sources. They can't just use, TikTok or Instagram as their source for research, or YouTube, right? Like, I mean, maybe they found a good video from there, but how can they tell if it's a good video? Just go through the practice of that, and having them formulate or just putting their ideas into a coherent whole, and then trying to persuade someone would be another useful thing to do, right? Research, presenting the information, and then if you can get them to do like a persuasive essay, that would be really good. What will be amazing is if you get them to do a persuasive essay or 2 persuasive essays, one from opposing sides. 5, so important, get into dialogue with them, maybe even have a little debate with them, right? Or force them to do their research and then have a debate. That's amazing, right? And dialogue, communication, conversation is such a great way, such a useful way to really explore and expand on ideas. It really helps us learn, especially as humans, as social creatures. And then finally, number 6, teach them logic, right? Teach them even just a handful of the most common logical fallacies, especially, I think, the one that is most prevalent today is this false cause, right? Where correlation does not equal cause, okay? Or just because A happens doesn't necessarily mean B will happen, right? Or like, how do people make that connection? That's being thrown around a lot today. Just challenging those and really teaching them how to debunk a lot of the common fallacies that's floating around out there. So that is what I have for you today. I hope it will be a helpful start. Just pick 1 or 2 of those things. And I know I myself am still in the process of really learning this, because I feel like, at least when I went to school, I had amazing teachers, but a lot of it was really focused on just memorizing content. There wasn't too much on analyzing, right? And actually, even in college, it was a lot of like, learn these facts and learn what your professor thinks of it and summarize that. And maybe they wanted me to have more original, creative ideas or ways to connect the information together, but it wasn't something that I got a lot of practice in before college and even through college. So I think that the sooner we can start, the better for our children and their future. And I think really what's at stake here is control of their lives, right? We want them to be truly free and to be truly the ones making the decisions that will affect them, making decisions in their lives, not other people making decisions for them. And that's happening today, right? In a very subtle way. Other people are controlling our lives and getting us to make decisions and act in ways that we don't really think about, and they're pre-made paths for us. So, yeah, I hope that's been helpful. If you found this helpful, please go ahead and subscribe, and I will see you next week. Have a blessed week.